the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns, the only daily Suns podcast. I'm your host, Brendan Clean. I cover the Suns and the NBA at SB Nation as well as Dime Magazine. Follow me on Twitter at BrendanClean14. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On PHX Suns. Back to you. Appreciate the patience, everybody. Those of you who were anxiously awaiting another Summer League podcast did not get it. And I appreciate, again, the patience there. Work in progress with YouTube, and I was in Vegas, and the quality on YouTube on Monday's show did not go as I would have liked. So I just made the executive decision, one of the great perks of being the only person involved in the production of this here show, that I was not going to go ahead and try that again. So here we are. It is Wednesday. Appreciate those of you who tuned in because we have a big show. We have a really big show today, because the bombs keep dropping here in NBA free agency, and we have a Suns-related nugget courtesy of Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report. Jalen Smith potentially on the trade market, trades being explored regarding Sticks, the star, the sort of only fulcrum of the Suns Summer League team here, and it made the floodgates open on Suns Twitter for sure, as far as if they should trade him, what they could fetch in a deal relating to Jalen Smith, and just really honestly what the long-term roster construction of this team looks like, just with that in mind, with the potential of a trade, just the idea that they are exploring one, coupled with some of what they've already done this offseason. It does create some interesting, it illustrates, I guess you could say, some interesting philosophies on the part of the Suns and their long-term vision for this thing. So we'll get into all of it. We'll start with the rumor and the report in general. We'll get into what the trades might be. Who could they get? What could it look like? What else would have to be involved? And then I actually want to close the show with some of that longer-term talk, but also part of the Fisher report was the Suns actually wanting DeMar DeRozan, at least poking around at DeMar DeRozan, apparently wanting to create the all-time most mid-range shots in a season for, I don't know, I guess in the 90s this was normal, but it would be the record-breaking for at least 5 to 10 years here in the NBA. We'll get into what that means as well, because I do want to touch on that. It's an interesting thing. I don't know how likely that was ever going to be, but worth discussing for sure. Before we get any further, though, guys, I have an exciting announcement. Those of you who are on podcasts may not be able to see this. That's okay. It's going to entice you even more to come watch these shows on YouTube again. So here it is. Suns NBA Finals towel could be yours if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's it. That's the only ask. If I get to 100 subscriptions right down below there, I'm going to give this towel away, and I am going to give it to one of the subscribers. That's it. That's all you have to do. I'm going to scroll through, pick a random number generator, and then scroll down to whatever number is corresponding on the subscription list with the person, and that person will get exclusive Suns NBA Finals towel. So that is the deal. All we have to do is get to 100. Look, we're going way past 100 eventually. We're going to the thousands. We're getting this thing off the ground, but I want to start strong here in week number 1 on YouTube. So that's what we're doing to get you guys convinced. But let's get into Jalen Smith. So I wanted to read the report verbatim from Jake Fisher. Again, this is at Bleacher Report. Jake's been doing excellent stuff. One of the only national reporters to crack the code of the Suns. You know, it is always a little bit dicey to know what's real and not real with this team since so little gets out. But because Jake has had a lot lately, I am inclined to believe it. And it also holds up to obvious scrutiny. This is a team that wants to very much get better. And Jalen Smith, as I will get into momentarily, does not look like a guy who's going to help them get better this season. So here's their quote. The Suns still have an open roster spot and part of the mid-level exception to play with. And Phoenix is entertaining various options, including gauging rival interest in 2020 lottery pick Jalen Smith. sources said. So here's my thinking. I'll start with the play. I'll start with Jalen Smith in Summer League, in the limited NBA action that we've seen him since he was drafted 10th overall last November. Last season, I don't really want to take much from. I mean, there's just hardly anything to go off of. I think he made his shots. I think he hustled. I mean, yeah, whatever. He did what he was supposed to do in garbage time, right? But you go to the G League bubble, and I think that was the initial inklings of like, what is this guy? What actually is Jalen Smith as a player? And I don't think there was necessarily a reason to be spectacularly excited. I mean, if we're being honest with ourselves, this is a guy who at age in his 20s, competing against guys who are teenagers, he should have dominated. I mean, imagine if LaMelo Ball, it's a ridiculous comparison, but just for the sake of argument, imagine if LaMelo Ball went to the G League bubble and how ridiculously dominant he would be, right? James Wiseman, even, I think you could make the case, would have had some extremely impressive statistical output. Jalen Smith just did not have that. You fast forward to Summer League, similar situation. I went on Locked On Cavs because I was hanging out with those guys in Vegas this week, and we were talking about Evan Mobley and Isaac Okoro, their guys, and it was, I think, I saw this going around on Twitter too, and it's something I've always thought, which is if you are very, very good in Summer League, you should be. If you're a great player, you should dominate in Summer League. You know, you should go out there and play so well in the first couple of games that they pull you off of the team. That is how you should play if you're a top 10 overall pick, right? If you're bad or just mediocre, I think it is a warning sign, because it shows that these are players who are in most cases very young and in many cases not going to make the NBA. And you, as a player who your franchise invested quite a bit into, this is the Josh Jackson conundrum, right? Are not dominating those lower level players. And I do think that's alarming. So the fact that Jalen Smith, despite getting all the shots he wants in Summer League, getting to shoot threes, getting to handle the ball, getting to face up, all of the opportunity. I mean, it's within the flow of the offense. They are running offense, but it's effectively Jalen, do whatever. And I don't think the fact that this trade situation came up should be looked at as a surprise, considering how often and how extensively they are featuring him in Summer League. But he's not doing that. He's not dominating. He's not looking like a player who was worthy of a top 10 overall pick. So it brings back the questions about the value of that selection at the time. And I think you couple the fact that somebody like Jake Fisher is hearing that sticks could potentially be available, it just intensifies the fact that not only are we seeing it, but the Suns front office believes it. So it believes that he's not necessarily ready. I don't think he's going to be a terrible player. I think what he does on the floor has value. I think if he's in a younger, rebuilding, developmental situation, he could become an NBA guy in time. I still feel like he tops out as a bench big man, maybe a third big man who can play 4 or 5 and space the floor for you a little bit, can rebound. The defense is going to be the thing that needs to come along, as well as just building out his skill, his skill level on, things like ball handling, passing, etc. So the Suns front office clearly thinks similarly in that he's not a player who we can count on. He's the Dario Saric replacement. I don't think that's where we are anymore. So what I think you have to always consider when it comes to trades in the NBA and in every sport is leverage, value, and flexibility. So I think the timing of this and the fact that he's being featured, it's all very connected. And I think the Suns have the flexibility to an extent. I think they have leverage less so. I think they are running out of time on value. So I'll get into all of it in just a second, but that is where we are. Jalen Smith has not shown himself to be an excellent player. That not only harms the Suns this season if they wanted him to be a part of this rotation, it also harms the ability to get something back for him in a trade. And that's the reality of where we are. So let's get into the leverage, the value, and the flexibility in a second, and who the Suns could potentially look to get when it comes to those three factors. We'll do that right after a quick break. First, though, a quick word from Headspace. Wouldn't it be great if there was a pocket-sized guide that helped you sleep, focus, or be just a better person? Well, there is. And if you have 10 minutes, Headspace can change your life. Headspace is your daily dose of mindfulness in the form of guided meditations in an easy-to-use app. Headspace is the only meditation app advancing the field of mindfulness and meditation through clinically validated research. So whatever your situation is, Headspace really can help you feel better. If you're overwhelmed, Headspace has a 3-minute SOS meditation just for you. If you need some help falling asleep, Headspace has wind-down sessions their members swear by. For parents, Headspace even has morning meditations you can do with your kids. Headspace's approach to mindfulness can reduce stress, improve sleep, boost focus, and increase your overall sense of well-being. Headspace is backed by 25 published studies on its benefits, 600,000 5-star reviews, and over 60 million app downloads. They make it easy for you to build a life-changing meditation practice with mindfulness that works for you on your schedule, anytime, anywhere. You deserve to feel happier, and Headspace is meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/lockedonnba. That's headspace.com/lockedonnba for a free 1-month trial with access to Headspace's full library of meditations for every situation. This is the best deal offered right now. Head to headspace.com/lockedonnba today. Today's show also brought to you by Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever, my favorite protein bar, and I would say the better way to put it at this point is the healthiest candy bar ever. It's almost insulting to even compare them to other protein bars because they are just so much better tasting. Covered in 100% chocolate, soft and easy to chew, tons of different flavors. Whatever your favorite candy bar is, find the Built Bar that aligns with it, and it's going to be delicious. It's going to potentially be better, and it's certainly going to be better for you. Only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, about 180 calories, and 18 grams of protein in each and every bar. That's comparable to just about any protein bar you're ever going to find out there, and it is delicious. Only 4 to 5 grams of sugar. So try out your favorite one more time. Maybe that's strawberry, maybe that's coconut, or try something new and go to built.com to do so. Use the promo code LOCK15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. Okay, we are back here. Let's get into the specifics of a potential Jalen Smith deal here. So once again, Jake Fisher reporting the Suns are looking to use a Jalen Smith trade to potentially fill out the rest of this roster. Not looking like you would want him to as far as dominating Summer League as a second-year NBA pro. And it all makes sense. It all very much aligns. So to get back to those three factors, guidelines, whatever you want to call it: flexibility, value, leverage. So leverage is a little tricky because there's not really anything saying the Suns don't have leverage. I think the value part is where the leverage, they're all connected, right? So the value is going down a little because Smith is not dominating these games like you would have hoped. And so then the leverage goes down because word gets out, oh, they're trading him. They want to move on. He's not looking good. Well, we're not giving you as much as we might have wanted is going to be the response the Suns get, right? So they're connected. I don't think it's an emergency. I don't think, personally, to be honest, I don't think the value was ever terribly high unless he would have come out and just killed it in the minutes that he got, potentially broken through the Suns rotation, dominated the G League. But from the jump, this is a pick that felt very high to a lot of people. I criticized it. I just didn't necessarily know what the thinking was in terms of what is Smith going to be? If everything were to break right, what would he have been? I don't know if that question ever got answered, and it doesn't even look like that best is coming soon. So the value was never altogether high. And so I think, to me, that's actually a positive. That might sound like I'm kind of crapping on it, but I'm not. I think that his value is basically what it was when he stepped into the league, which is Smith is a player who is going to be a guy who takes a little bit of work. He's going to be somewhat of a project. He doesn't have a clearly defined role path to being like a high-level role player right away, early in his career. And he needs some time to develop. So I think that's where we still are. I think that contributes to the leverage. Other teams are going to know you're trying to, the Suns are trying to flip this guy to become a player who can help them now. That's the leverage that the Suns maybe do lose a little bit, is opposing teams are going to look and say, we're not going to help you get better just because you have this roster spot with a young guy that you don't have the time to develop. We're going to make something even. So let's get into the deals that might happen. And I think the Suns tools to making a deal are pretty obvious, right? So Dario Saric, who despite being injured has a tradable salary. Just the pure number is one that helps you combine to get up to a player that's good, right? So Dario Saric is making $9.3 million. He just came off of that. It'll be 8.5 this upcoming season, and then 9.2 the following season. Don't forget, too, Jalen Smith himself, because he was such a high pick, actually makes a decent amount of money. So this upcoming season, it'll be $4.5 million. The Suns also have Jay Crowder, who I don't personally believe should be part of a trade right now, especially with Smith not looking great, Saric hurt. You don't really have another four. I mean, Cam Johnson can be there, but going into the NBA season with that as your rotation, depending on who you would get back in a trade, is a little bit startling, which brings me to those are the tools that they're working with. In addition to, at the earliest, a 2024 first-round pick. If they wanted to, they could use those tools to get a four, to get the guy that we've always known that would make DeAndre Ayton better, right? I've always loved it's not going to happen now because he's now a Denver Nugget, but Aaron Gordon was always a guy that I thought would have been great here because he can move the ball, he can fit in the 0.5 system, he can shoot corner threes for you, and he's going to defend all sorts of guys and provide some back line help defense for you, be able to defend playmakers, perimeter guys, all sorts of things. So a player like that is ideally who the Suns would want to target if they're looking to improve not only the roster spot that Jalen Smith is on, but get a little bit better at that four spot, because that's obviously what they really need. So Gordon's not really an option anymore, but Larry Nance is. Larry Nance, I think, could really help this team. We talked about Thad Young on Monday's show with Brandon, and I still very much like that idea. I think Thad Young is a little bit of a different type of guy. He played a lot of 5 last season. He's not as much of a perimeter defender at this point in time, but he can defend forwards. He can defend a lot of 5s. He can defend some wings, and is really just been a very, very high level and smart defensive player for basically his entire career at this point. Now, not as excellent of a shooter, and probably not as great of a passer as Aaron Gordon, but passable there. And he's a veteran. So I think Young would be pretty helpful as well. Nance would be great. I mean, Nance would be awesome. I think the price is probably too high. And then, of course, there's guys like Pascal Siakam and different very, very highfalutin ideas like that. I don't even necessarily want to go too far into the who at this point. Those are some of the obvious names. I will just bring up, too, that I don't personally feel like the 4 spot is the only position that the Suns should be targeting. And it'll go into a little bit of what we'll talk about to close the show with DeMar DeRozan and just how this roster is shaping up in general. But I also think, aside from the 4 spot, the other primary priority, if I was the Suns, would be getting a point guard, which might sound weird because they just got Cameron Payne and Chris Paul back. But I personally still feel like this Suns team does not have a point guard of the future, not somebody that they can be super confident is going to step in and be a high-level starting caliber player for you when Chris Paul inevitably retires. I mean, you have a young enough core that you're going to be expecting to compete for a championship after Chris Paul starts to wind down. So, yes, the Suns did very well to get Chris Paul on the type of a contract where they can move on from him without too much risk financially after the next 2 seasons are over, but they don't have a stopgap solution, and this roster is getting expensive, and they don't have the picks, and you start to stack all of that up, and it makes me feel like that should still be a priority, is to get a young point guard who you think can at least, maybe Cameron Payne's still around, maybe he's a guy who is starting for you, but you have depth there, and you have enough talent to continue to get better at that position. They don't have anybody behind Cameron Payne. Tyshawn Alexander is not a point guard, even if he does hit and become a guy here for the Suns. So 4-man who can do some of those versatility defensive things as well as fit into the offensive system, or a point guard that's relatively young who can compete in the future for minutes with Chris Paul, without Chris Paul, with Cameron Payne, without Cameron Payne. That is where I would look. And so the Suns have the tools to get that done. They can trade a first-round pick. People like to say that they cannot because it's protected in all these weird ways. They can trade a first-round pick. They would word it in such a way that it conveys after 2 years after the pick that they owe Oklahoma City from the Chris Paul trade conveys. That would be how you would work it out. So between that, Saric, Crowder, and Smith, they have the pieces to get, again, the flexibility point, right? So I talked about value and leverage. The flexibility is the other part. And I mean that from a cap perspective. And they have that. They do, because of the money that they can combine up to get to a bigger number, as well as they don't have a ton of picks. They really don't. But they can trade picks if they really had a good opportunity in front of them. So to sum things up, I do think, based on how Smith has looked, the fact that the Suns don't have the capacity to develop him, and the fact that his value could easily get lower than it is if he continues to worry people about he's not dominating like he should, and the fact that they have these needs that they still could fill to get better, and the fact that they can put a trade together not just with Smith, using some value elsewhere. All of that makes me very much on board with, let's go ahead and trade Jalen Smith if and when that opportunity arises. If they can get a good player at one of those spots without giving up too much in a very fair trade that helps them get closer to a championship, I am all for it. On the record, there we go. I am for it. And I think they should be poking around because of everything I just laid out. But I do want to continue on that thread because I want to talk a little bit more about how the Suns are looking at this roster long term. Point guard just being one of those layers. So we'll get into that in just 1 second. First, though, a quick word from betonline.ag. BetOnline is the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. If you're crazy, if you are just living for BetOnline, living for betting on your favorite sports, hit the Summer League odds. Check them out. See, maybe there's a championship odds. Hit Portland. we got Michael Beasley or Houston. But Portland has Michael Beasley, Kenneth Faried, and Emmanuel Mudiay. They came to win in Las Vegas. But yeah, look at the Rockets. I don't know. What you probably know. If you're already that deep into it, you know better than me who to bet on. But I'll tell you where to bet on it, and that is betonline.ag. Sign-up bonuses, sporting news, contest info, constantly updated. So do not sit on the sidelines anymore. Get into the action, whether that is Summer League or any of your other favorite sports. Head to betonline.ag on the web or on your mobile device. Make an account today, and when you do, use the promo code LOCKEDON to get a 50% welcome bonus when you make your first deposit. That's promo code LOCKEDON when you make your first deposit at BetOnline to get a 50% welcome bonus straight to your account. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Okay, let's close things out here, folks. Philosophy, team building philosophy, but not even really. We're not going to get it too deep into the weeds of any of that stuff, but it's more as how does that philosophy actually like playing out for the Suns, because we're already seeing it. We're already seeing how it's affecting things. And the DeMar DeRozan angle is not different per se than some of the other decisions, but it's a unique angle because it's an older guy and somebody that I just frankly didn't think the Suns would be in on. So I'll talk about that to close, but I want to start with the other stuff. So the moves we've seen the Suns make, and I do, like Brandon said this to me, and I appreciate it on Monday because I do this sometimes. I think we all do, of gauging and grading and evaluating a roster before it's complete, right? It's easy because we get so excited about all these transactions and we want to just let the A+, B+, C+, but it's not always that easy. So I do understand that. However, I'll say the moves that the Suns have made, and I do think it tells a little bit of the story. So 29 and Javon Carter for Landry Shamet. JaVale McGee, 1-year deal. Abdul Nader, relatively young guy. They bring him back. Bring Frank Kaminsky back, but both on short deals. Nader on a 2-year deal. Kaminsky on a 1-year deal. And now this Jalen Smith thing and the DeMar DeRozan thing. And that's really it. I mean, they obviously re-sign Cameron Payne and Chris Paul to descending contracts that also are very short and have non-guarantees at the end of the season. So all of that to say, between Shamet having basically being an expiring contract, not drafting a player at 29 who would have been a young piece, whether he turns into something or not, that's value. That's a young player on a affordable contract that, yes, extends multiple years, but is a player. It shows that the Suns are very much focused on the present, the current, the short term, right? And I think we can celebrate the fact, just from a geeky cap perspective, that, oh, wow, the Suns did really well on the Payne and the Chris Paul contracts. But what it tells us about the team is that I feel like they don't want to invest too much into what's happening now to expect that it's going to continue to happen into the future. They want to remain nimble, but I think at the same time, you remain nimble, and that's good. That's obviously a great thing. But I think you can go too far in that direction where you start to sacrifice long-term flexibility. So the Suns are going to have an opportunity next season to, let's say, sign Landry Shamet again, or maybe potentially sign and trade him, right? That's a good thing to have, a restricted free agent who they're not going to have cap space anyway, so he's able to be on their books and they can use that as some flexibility. They either get a good young player long-term if they want to keep him, if he has a good season, or they're able to push that down the road and maybe get something else back for him. Similar with Payne and Paul, they're not committed too long, but they also have the ability to potentially go ahead and keep those guys if they want to. They can guarantee Paul's contract, they can have Cameron Payne re-sign, they can guarantee Payne's contract, etc. But you add in the fact that now they're potentially going to be trading Jalen Smith for what we would presume would be a veteran. Let's say that they trade for Thaddeus Young, who is an expiring player this season. That would be another move that puts a lot of impetus on this season's team to win a lot and win the championship, ideally, right? I mean, most teams want to win the championship, but when you have that many eggs in that basket, it starts to be a little bit of a problem. They don't have a first-round pick next season. They don't have, if they were to trade Smith, or even if they don't trade Smith, they really don't have the type of young talent that you would hope would be there to go ahead and continue to build this down the road. I mean, it's a very hard thing to do. So I'm not sitting here saying that you need to not only, like, it is very having your cake and eating it too, to say, oh, well, of course, all Suns fans would really love if they could compete for a championship the next couple of seasons, but also, can you maintain some flexibility so that this team can compete for championships for the next 10 years? I get that. And I just got done saying I'm all for trading Jalen Smith. So it is hard to do both. It's not always possible to do both. When you have an opportunity to get Chris Paul, you trade a 2022 first-round pick, right? You can quibble with if they needed to do that and what the trade could have looked like, blah, 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 right? It is, at the end of the day, not all that important. The reality is they got a player who helped them get to a championship reach, a championship level, and you do that every time. However, I do just feel like there needs to be a little bit more of a focus on the future, right? There needs to be somebody that gives you hope down the line. And especially when you have Bridges and Johnson, who are nominally the young guys on this team, but they're not young, right? They're already basically in their primes. They're both about to get pretty expensive in the next couple of seasons. If Smith doesn't work out, if you turn Smith into a veteran and you have this situation with Shamet play out and you don't have a first-round pick next season, you could imagine a situation where the beginning of next season, the Suns don't have Smith, they don't have Shamet, they don't have a first-round pick from 2022, and they're looking at a roster that's pretty much set in stone and also pretty darn expensive. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I just think that is the type of thinking that front offices do, that great teams should be doing, and that this Suns front office has, at least this offseason and last offseason, not made it a strong priority to try to have the both and of roster building. Both winning now and building for the future. It's very much been a focus on the first. It's not to say that one is better than the other. If you win a title, nobody cares. The Cavs are in very dire straits right now. Do you think any Cavs fans would have traded the 2016 title to be a little better now with some young talent? Of course not. You win and you love it and you never forget it, and everything else is gravy for many, many years. It's just to point out that that's what's happening. So I do just think it's the other side of the Jalen Smith conundrum of, if they trade Jalen Smith, that will only exacerbate this issue that is materializing. And it's part of what sucks about James Jones's job, part of why I am thrilled to never, ever be smart enough or talented enough to have to do that. I get to do this and just talk about it and tell you guys my thoughts and get probably some of it wrong. That's the good stuff, right? Let's close on to DeMar DeRozan. The Suns apparently sniffed around on him. Now, he ended up signing a 3-year, $67 million or something like that. 57. I believe it was 19 annually. And that's way out of what the Suns could have ever offered. Now, Fisher did report that it would have been a complicated sign and trade type of deal for DeRozan to end up with the Suns. And I'm not questioning Jake's reporting, but I actually don't, just reading the article, it doesn't seem like that portion was reported. I think he was able to report out that there was potentially some interest from the Suns. And then the secondary part is looking at the roster and cap situation and saying, well, they wouldn't have been able to sign him to $19 million. That's accurate, clearly. My thing is, I think actually what was probably more likely, just reading the tea leaves / just sort of guessing, but knowing how the Suns operated this offseason, is that they probably were looking at maybe, can we get him for the mid-level exception? Because Jake Fisher also reported in his deep dive on DeRozan that many teams were interested in DeRozan at that mid-level price. There was a time when it felt to his camp like that was all he was going to be able to get. And at that point, the Suns become a pretty optimal situation. I mean, DeRozan could have just come off the bench and scored a bunch, and if he doesn't play in the playoffs as much and you worry about him defensively, well, you have offense. But I also think he would have been excellent. That we know that they need some bench scoring. You're hoping at this point Payne gets a little better. Maybe Shamet can give you some of that, and you piece it together. But DeRozan would have been an excellent plug for that hole at the mid-level, and then you find a center for the minimum, and McGee's not part of it. And that all makes total sense. And that's my hunch, is that that's what more of the Suns were poking around at. But I guess just to double down, it would have probably been a 1-year deal at the mid-level, maybe 2 years. But it just further exemplifies how the Suns were wanting this season, and maybe next season to basically be the years to win the title. Again, I'm not even here to try to pass judgment and decide proactively which moves were better and worse, and should they have. We don't know. If they win a title, we'll know. We'll be able to say, yeah, good call. They made the right decision. But it's just to say that signing a guy in his 30s who has a very fixed way of playing and is not figuring to get better or be around in the league at a very elite level for much longer would have been a admittedly short-term type of move. It just is. Of course, it's obvious that that's what that would have been. But the fact that they were interested in him, coupled with all of these other things that they did this offseason, it's just beating that dead horse of the Suns really want to win in the next 2 seasons. And how that continues to affect how they think about and build out this roster is going to be very interesting. It's going to be probably the singular question, aside from do they win a title, that Suns fans are going to have to be thinking about going forward. So this Smith thing would be the sort of cherry on top, the final straw of this type of thinking, but it's something we can see across a lot of what they did this offseason. And I'm excited to see how they finish it off. I'm excited to see, do they get a Smith trade done? Do they figure out a way to get another good player in with the rest of their mid-level exception? The Suns are not done building. They could be even closer to a title. They've done a lot of great things this offseason, filled a lot of holes and kept their core together to run it back and be even better next season. But it's just giving us a lot to think about. It really is. So I'll be here all week. Promise. I do promise this time. I'm not going anywhere. I will be back throughout the week to go ahead and give you guys the latest, not only on Summer League. We'll see if Jalen Smith can up that value I wouldn't be surprised if he has a good game, if they go ahead and pull him off of the team for the rest of Summer League. But I'm not going anywhere, folks. So we'll be back the rest of the week. Whatever happens in free agency / the trade market, whatever happens out in Vegas on the Thomas and Mack hardwood, I'll be here to give you all of it. Do not forget, subscribe to Locked On Suns on YouTube. Get your chance at a Let's Get Loud NBA Finals towel, and I'll talk to you guys the rest of the week.